Hello there. I'm going to be going over a bit the process and logic that I use for gearing champions in the game. I'm going to go over DPS, tank, healer, and crowd control champions. Um, and really for DPS, the process is fairly simple. There's two main categories of content in the game related to DPS. There's somewhat low defense content, by which I mean most of the gear raids, the gear dungeons, the guild bosses, etc. Mostly PvE stuff, where the defense values will never really get that high. And in those situations, you just want to kind of hit a minimum of attack. So, say, right, we go for attack, crit damage, attacks. So, actually, hold on. I'm going to do these in order of priority, right? Once you have your values in attack, you're going to want necessarily that 100% crit rate. You're going to want some attack speed, ideally a good plus 300, at least as much of that as you can, and then crit damage. Which normally is a decent build, and then any crit damage you're building on top of that is just pure added value. This means that for the last piece, normally we can get away with a crit damage main. We're going to go ahead and equip. That's a terrible one. There we go. That would be much better. And there is some distinction here, right? For a champion like Hex, who has fairly low attack, you're possibly going to want to prioritize a left side set that gives you attack. For someone like Setram, who has more base attack, or even... where is she? Or even Val, you're going to want... you could probably get away with more crit damage on the left side, so you're going to go for example, Annihilating Might, or the new DPS set, which I keep on forgetting constantly the name. And I don't have any good gear for it, so... whatever it's supposed to be called. Humor me, give me a second here. Wicked Vengeance, there we go. But yeah, depending on the base attack, really, you just want to kind of hit a certain threshold. That threshold evolves really based on the content you're doing. You kind of need some fine-tuning on testing to figure out exactly what's best for the content you are currently working on. Not be able to get any speed on a chest right now. That's a terrible piece, but whatever. We're just going to equip it for the video. So, yeah, right, roughly... I'm kind of looking for these values mostly when I'm gearing Hex for PvE. He has a good 200 and change % attack. Actually, for a lot of content, namely I think Guild Boss, this is actually a case where if you're running with endgame gear, you could probably get away with 2 crit damage sets, because you're still at roughly 200% increase in attack, which is fairly good. Even more if you start considering the artifact, right? We're at almost times 3.5, something like that. We have our plus 300 attack speed, we are crit capped, and we're sitting at, because I don't want to do the math, 338% crit damage, with some rage regen. This is a solid build. It's not great. It's not using my great gear, because my good gear is currently on champs that are waiting to be locked in for GVG. They should already be locked in, but I never trust this system. But yeah, this is roughly how I would consider building a champ for PvE. You can focus a lot more on crit damage than you would be able to on the next category of content I'm going to get into, which would be stuff like Arena, stuff like GVG, stuff like High Gear Raid 1. Possibly some other content, but honestly, from the testing I've made, I've not seen any other parts of the game right now where I really need to focus attack. Maybe the epilogue. It just didn't really do much testing in terms of optimizing the damage. But for all the contents that I just listed, you're going to want to go for basically the entire right side attack. There are some exceptions to this. And this kind of cuts into what I was saying before, is really if you have a champ like, say, Silas, to a lesser extent, Deimos, Micah, if actually she's somewhat worthwhile when leveled. That's those are basically champions that have the penetration integrated, so you don't need as much attack to get away with things, right? If I go, I mean, most people already know what Silas does, but just for the sake of it, and Silas essentially does not care about, I don't even, there we go. 50% of the target's def is just flat out ignored. And then, yeah, if you're already ignoring 50% of the def, you can get away with probably 2, maybe even 3 crit damage pieces for a lot of content. You're still probably going to want at least 1 attack piece for everything that's GVG and arena related, but that's roughly it, really. The rest of the priorities remain. You're still going to want to try to aim for that plus 300 attack speed. You want to get crit capped. I just didn't really bother with it right here. And you're going to end up probably dropping a lot in terms of crit damage. But that's realistically okay, because crit damage scales off of what you're already doing as base on the attack hit. So if that's being reduced by defense to a substantially lower value because you just have less attack, then that crit damage just becomes utterly worthless. And that's really it. There's no real other specificities for DPS champions. There's kind of just those 2 categories. So I'll probably just move on ahead to say, let's do tank gear, because that's just really easy. Tanks can kind of just be seen in 2 categories as well. There's champions like, say, Livian and Olag, who you don't really care about the ultimate on. It's not bringing you more survival. In the case of Olag, it's removing from your survival. In the case of Livian, it's probably already up all the time anyway, so who cares? And for those, you're just going to want to stack your flat stats. You're going to want to put a priority on HP in general. There may be some content where you're going to want differently, but they're few and far between. In the case of Livian, actually, it could be interesting to have a little bit of attack speed or rage regen if you can fit it on. Sorry, not rage regen, no. In this case, we just want attack speed because of her stun. But really, there's only the main stats that matter. So HP, again, def, flat HP. We don't seem to have anything available because everything is probably equipped on someone else. Let's remove defense. And we have... Jesus. How do I have so little... whatever. All the good gear is really just equipped on people anyways. And then one last piece just for the sake of it. There we go. Go over to left side. You're going to want HP and def for sure. Ideally flat def. Right? And then you grab kind of... I'd prefer more HP. There we go. And here we kind of want that set bonus. So there we go. And really that's it. Where it becomes a bit more interesting is for champions like, say, Baron, Rockier, Gon, Reggie. Really, any of the ones is old. Any of the ones that actually have value in you cycling their ult and using it somewhat regularly. Here, let's just quick unequip Reggie. So here we're going to just kind of change the focus. The focus will not be on the flat stats anymore. It's going to be on speed and regen. Because it's overall going to bring a lot more value to the table. And we could fit in either flat def or flat HP. If you really want to start fine-tuning for that, you can. But I just personally find it to be more of a hassle than anything else to actually get that in, because you have to test for flat HP, then flat def, compare the two. It's just like, who the f cares? So yeah, really the constants kind of just become somewhat different. That attack speed to get more hits, to get more rage regen per hit, becomes very important. Because the more they cycle their ults, the more they are likely to actually let you survive longer. We're not going to get attack speed there, so let's just equip that. And that is roughly, again, the concept for tanks. There is no real hard minimum limit. You can, in most situations in the game, get away with one defense piece as main instead of a HP. For some champions, that's actually a direct benefit. If you can get gone in, say, one, maybe two death pieces with some crit rate and attack speed, he could actually start doing some amount of damage, but really that's not why you're mainly using him, so that comes as a very secondary objective. You really just want him to survive most of the time. Moving on from tanks, we're then going to hit... I don't know what I'm doing. We're then going to hit the somewhat wonky subcategory of champions, which is just this crowd control ones. So that's stuff like, say, Theowin, Greed, Mary, to an extent, say, I'm positive I'm forgetting one. Or multiple. Nah, whatever. Point is, stuff where you want the ult to cycle quickly, and you want the attacks to land quickly. So that's mostly stuff that has slow, debuffs, stuns, crowd control, in general, really. But brings very little to the table in terms of damage. I is kind of exception to this. She can be built damage-wise, so I'm not going to use her as the example. But say I want to build a Mary, I do not care about the main stat, the Bangle. I'm just going to look for two things. I'm going to look for rage regen and attack speed. I'm going to do that for both. Actually, for just the Bangle, I want to see if I have a rage regen ring. I do, with good value in attack speed, so I'm going to equip that. I'm going to remove the attack speed from there, go for rage regen, go for attack speed on the amulet. Yes, we're going to go with that. And then here, we're also going to be looking for speed and regen. In this case, it's possibly more beneficial if we can find, there we go, a whirlwind with speed on it. And then queue into, do we have any whirlwind? Nope, we do not. Queue into this. And then we end up at 700 attack speed total, meaning our interval is, right, yeah, one attack every 0.9 seconds. We have a plus 11 rage on hit. So we're going to be cycling that ult, which has a total of, 1,100, very quickly. And this is somewhat applicable to, like I was saying, Greed, Theowin, Mary. I will sometimes consider building either Greed or Theowin in either a DPS set with still a very strong focus on attack speed, or simply just building them in Vig, or Morale to boost the rest of the team on top of providing their added value. And the very last type of champion that I'm going to talk about is, the healers. And I'm going to kind of switch my focus here from the game. I ran some tests on healing just to have some actual reasonable data to back this up, because it was fairly simple to test healing and actually determine what overall brought the most value. So I tested in Gear Raid 121, no Power of Dominance, just placing Brock and Percy, right? And just screenshot a basic heal. This is the Brock I use, so he's set something like, actually we can go check that right now. He's at, so I'm not going to do math, almost 120,000 HP. And these are the builds I use. So I started with just full healing effect, minimal added attack. I think the only attack that came from the build was from the artifact and the weapon. Not a single sub, and none of the mains. But we ended up at plus 211 healing effect, doing so like 20.5k, and then a full attack build. So neglecting entirely healing effect, and we were doing 17,000.6. So there is a very big disparity between the two if you just use one. As you start combining them, it turns out that they start getting a lot better healing-wise. We're vastly superior to the first one, and even more so the second one. But we're just aiming for, somewhat middle ground value. Like 220 still healing effect, just with a lot more attack. Ended up doing 24,000, like I said. Attack mains and healing subs were ended up slightly better at 25,000 roughly. And then I started matching different pieces of the gear. So 2 attack mains and a healing main, again with the substats. So none of these had, during all of this, right, there was only 2 stats that were actually tested. I did not have any flat attack rolls. Did not really have anything besides just an attack percent main with healing effect, or a healing effect main with attack percent substat. Most of the rolls for the substats were in the purple range, and yeah. So in terms of raw healing value, I think this is the one that is the best. But then you're like, right, there are marginal differences. It's like 400 difference between just full attack main and healing subs, and mixing and matching the main stats. Very marginal difference if we have 2 healing mains and attack percent main. Where it gets slightly more interesting is when you start fitting in just a speed main with both healing effect and attack percent and stats. The decrease is minimal. It's paltry 1,000 healing, but you're also gaining like 200 attack speed, unless the rest of your gear is actually pretty insane and you're hitting, I don't know, say over plus 400 attack speed. That's a lot of attack interval that you're gaining for a marginal decrease. So over the course of a long fight, you're going to be doing a lot more healing. Again, right, very, very small differences between using a mix and match and just focusing on attack or focusing on healing effect. The difference is slightly more important. The diminishing returns on healing effect are real. They seem to start to really kick in at about 150, or it just becomes less and less interesting to stack it compared to attack. And yeah, so this wasn't really tested with regen, because as you can see, I really don't have regen. I didn't manage to keep the substats consistent with each other. I had to end up just using a crit damage ring that had the reasonable substats, but it doesn't really matter. It doesn't impact our healing. Again, minimal difference. Still losing a full 1,000, but maybe that difference of about 60% rage regen is something that you need to clear content. I'm thinking about stuff like Midan and Guild Boss 2, or really any number of other things where you need to cycle ults quickly. Hollow, Laya, basically really any of the healers that benefit from this. And yeah, I think that was really the extent of my testing. Mostly the conclusion is that all the differences are fairly small. This was, after I did my testing, I slapped together a build. This is what I ended up with, which stuck to what I was saying and what I noted from testing. We're at, roughly 600 attack speed, because we can get there. 173 healing effect, 115% rage regen. It ends up being in fairly balanced build. You're healing quickly, you're regenerating your ult quickly, and you're probably maximizing what you can do in terms of healing. So this is, I believe it's attack, or yeah, it's attack percentage and a healing effect, which ended up being, if we just check this real quick, right, the most balanced and efficient in terms of maximizing the actual healing we're doing, while keeping that speed main. It didn't seem worthwhile to maintain the 60% rage regen. Just didn't bring enough value, in my opinion, because I have left side gear that has rage regen. If you do not have that, it may become more interesting for you to have a ring with rage regen. That's really kind of up to you to tweak and determine past that. But yeah, that's basically how I gear the champs, why I gear the champs that way, and what I've roughly inferred from testing. So yeah, cheers and have a nice one.